All right, so today we're tackling a really interesting question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's why hasn't the Baha'i faith, with its focus on unity and these kind of like universal principles, why hasn't it caught on with more people,
Hmm.
especially those who already, follow other established religions?
Right, right.
So we've got these excerpts from a text that digs into this, and it goes into some really fascinating territory.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like psychological and historical stuff.
So we're going beyond just like the straight historical facts, kind of getting into the psychology of like why people believe what they believe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool.
So it's like, that saying,
Yeah.
the nail that sticks out gets hammered down.
Right.
But in this case, we're not talking about nails. We're talking about ideas.
Ideas. Yeah.
And one of the biggest hammers out there, according to our source, is tradition.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Tradition.
Yeah.
I mean, religion and tradition are just so intertwined.
It's true. Yeah.
They get tied up with like cultural identity, personal comfort.
Like all the good stuff.
Think about it, like those
Yeah.
holidays, those
Mhm.
family rituals, the things that are passed down through generations.
No.
Even the way, faith can bring us comfort when we're grieving.
Right.
It's all woven into like the fabric of our lives.
Yeah, it's like a warm, fuzzy blanket on a cold night.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, does that blanket sometimes, keep us from looking for other sources of warmth? Maybe even something more suited for, like, I don't know, the changing seasons of life?
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I see what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And the source makes this point that when you have that strong pull of tradition, it can be really hard to even consider shifting your worldview,
Oh, for sure.
especially when you're talking about beliefs that have been with you since you were a kid.
Right, right. And it's not just any belief, right? It's this whole concept of, like, a messiah or a promised one.
Yeah, almost every religion has some version of that.
It's true.
This
Yeah.
figure who's going to come and usher in this era of peace and justice.
Exactly. And the Baha'i Faith is saying, well, Baha'u'llah is that figure.
Mm-hmm.
He's the fulfillment of these prophecies across all these different religions.
And there's this really powerful quote from Baha'u'llah himself where he says, "This is the day whereon mankind can behold the face and hear the voice of the promised one."
I mean, that's a bold statement.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
But I can see how someone who's really rooted in their own tradition might not just, accept that.
It's true.
Like saying, hey, the thing you've been waiting for, it already happened.
Right.
But maybe not in the way you expected.
Yeah, it's about expectations
Yeah.
versus reality.
Right.
And a lot of people, as the source points out, they cling to these very literal interpretations of Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for very specific signs or a physical return.
Right.
So it makes it really hard to accept a new revelation, even if it aligns with what they already believe.
It's like they're searching for a very specific puzzle piece.
Uh-huh.
And even if this new piece fits the overall picture, they reject it because it doesn't look exactly like what they had in mind.
I like that. Yeah.
Right.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And that kind of ties into what the text talks about next, which is the role of, religious leaders
Oh, yeah.
and how that impacts people's willingness to be open to new ideas.
Authority figures, right?
Exactly, authority.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it has to do with, the idea that in a lot of religions you have clergy who act as intermediaries between believers and, like, their understanding of God.
It's true. They provide guidance.
Right.
They interpret Scripture. They become these, like, really respected figures in the community.
Right. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
You want someone to help make sense of these, like, complicated spiritual concepts.
Absolutely.
But I'm sensing a but here. What's the downside of relying so much on these authority figures?
Well, the problem is when that reliance overshadows personal exploration,
Yeah.
independent thinking,
Right.
it can create an environment where questioning those traditional interpretations feels like you're challenging the authority of those leaders.
Right. And nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, it can be a tough thing to do.
So it becomes almost taboo to even entertain different perspectives.
In a way, yeah, you're expected to just accept what those authorities say without question.
Wow. So the text contrasts this with the way that the Baha'i Faith emphasizes personal investigation,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually abolishes clergy altogether.
No clergy.
So you're not supposed to just take someone's word for it.
Yeah.
You're encouraged to, like, delve into the writings, reflect on it, and come to your own understanding.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's less about blind faith and more about, like, informed conviction.
Yes, exactly.
Huh, interesting.
And this approach is highlighted in a quote from the Tablets of Baha'u'llah. He says, "It is incumbent upon every man of insight and understanding to strive to translate that which hath been written into reality and action."
Oh, that's good. So it's not just about passively reading scripture.
No, not at all.
It's about, like, internalizing it, making it your own, and applying it to your life.
Exactly, making it real.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It is, and it can create a really different kind of community.
Okay.
This emphasis on personal responsibility.
Yeah.
It leads to a more mature, dynamic, spiritual community.
Interesting.
Like, imagine a community where everyone is encouraged to develop their own insights through study, reflection, prayer. That's what the Baha'i Faith is all about.
That sounds really empowering,
It is.
but also potentially chaotic.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right. Like, if everyone is interpreting things their own way, how do you maintain any sense of unity or shared understanding?
Well, that's where this principle of independent investigation of truth comes in.
Oh, okay. So that's where we're headed next.
That's right.
All right, listeners, you'll have to stay tuned for part 2, where we unpack this idea of independent investigation and how it plays into this bigger question of why the Baha'i Faith hasn't gained wider acceptance.
So we were talking about this whole idea of independent investigation of truth.
Right.
Which is really key in the Baha'i Faith.
Yeah.
And our source is suggesting that it's especially relevant now, like where humanity is at right now. Almost like we're going through this collective spiritual growth spurt, you know?
Okay, I like that.
And we're meant to step up and really take ownership of what we believe.
No more spiritual kindergarten.
Exactly.
That's right, you gotta graduate.
We got to graduate.
No more juice boxes and nap time.
No more nap time.
We're doing the real deal.
It's time for critical thinking.
Right, active truth seeking.
Yep. No more blindly accepting what we're told.
Right, but I think that's gotta be tougher than it sounds.
Oh, definitely.
Because religion is so social.
Oh, for sure.
Right. It's like your family, your friends, your whole community is often built around these shared beliefs.
Absolutely.
And if you step outside of that, even if you feel like you're being true to yourself, it can be really isolating.
You're so right. The text actually talks about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the power of social influence and, just how comfortable it is to conform.
Right.
That deep need to belong.
Yeah.
And changing your faith, or even questioning parts of it, can lead to friction,
Oh, yeah.
misunderstandings, even rejection from the people you're closest to.
Totally. It's like showing up to a party where everyone's wearing a uniform.
Right.
And you're in something completely different.
Yeah.
You might stand out, but you might also feel like you just don't fit in anymore.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Right.
And that fear of not belonging,
Yeah.
of being the odd one out,
Yeah.
it's a big deterrent
Totally.
for people who might otherwise be open to exploring new ideas.
Right. But the Baha'i Faith has a different take on this whole unity thing.
Oh, for sure.
Right. It's not about everyone believing exactly the same thing or conforming to some rigid set of doctrines.
Right. The Baha'i concept of unity is way deeper than that.
Okay. So what is it about then?
It's about recognizing that we're all part of one human family, you know, going beyond these artificial divisions.
So like race, nationality.
Yeah. All that.
Even religion.
Even religion.
Okay. So more like harmony within diversity.
Exactly. We can celebrate our differences, but still recognize our shared humanity.
I like that.
And Baha'u'llah, he sums this up beautifully in the Kitab-i-Aqdas.
Okay.
He says, "The well-being of mankind, its peace and security, are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established."
Powerful stuff.
It is.
It's like that saying, united we stand, divided we fall.
Right.
But like on a global scale.
Exactly.
That also means a pretty big shift in perspective.
Right, it does, yeah.
Letting go of that us versus them mentality.
Yeah, all those ingrained ideas that have caused so much conflict.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not easy.
So that brings us to another hurdle the text talks about, which is like this fear of the unknown, letting go of what feels certain.
It's human nature to crave that security, that feeling that we know what's true and what's not.
And religion often provides that, right?
It does. It gives you that framework for understanding the world.
Right.
Like a moral compass. answers to those big existential questions.
Yeah, like a roadmap for life.
Yeah.
Even if it's a little outdated.
Maybe a little outdated.
Doesn't account for all the detours.
Right.
But it seems like the Baha'i Faith challenges that need for absolute certainty.
It does. It encourages a more nuanced view of truth.
Okay.
It's about embracing that journey of discovery,
Yeah.
even if it means questioning what you thought you knew. Recognizing that spiritual truth isn't static.
Right.
It's dynamic.
It evolves.
So instead of clinging to that old roadmap, we're being told to grab a compass and chart our own course.
I like, even if it takes us off the beaten path.
That's a good way to put it.
Right.
Yeah, and Baha'u'llah, he actually warns against becoming prisoners of our past.
Oh, interesting.
He talks about vain imaginings and fancies.
So, like, our attachment to what we think is certain can actually blind us to the truth.
Exactly. It's like we're clinging to a life raft, even though we've already reached the shore.
Right. But how do you convince someone to let go of that life raft?
It's tough.
Especially if they're afraid of what might be lurking in the water.
That's where this idea of progressive revelation comes in.
Okay, so tell me about that.
The Baha'i Faith says that God's revelations aren't just these static pronouncements from the past. It's an ongoing process.
So what worked for people centuries ago might not be relevant or sufficient today?
Exactly. We have to see if what we believe aligns with where humanity is at right now.
That makes sense.
And there's this really pointed quote from the Kitab-i-Iqan where Baha'u'llah says, "The religious doctors have hindered the people from attaining the shore of eternal salvation, inasmuch as they held the reins of authority in their mighty grasp."
Wow, that's a pretty strong critique.
It is, yeah.
So if we're supposed to move beyond blind faith and into this era of spiritual maturity, what role does religion even play?
Good question.
Do we even need it anymore?
The Baha'i Faith actually addresses that head on.
Oh, okay.
It says that religion still matters, but its role is changing.
Interesting.
Instead of dictating dogma and forcing conformity, it should be a catalyst for transformation.
For individuals and for society as a whole.
It's exactly.
So it's less about rules and rituals and more about understanding spiritual principles and putting them into action.
Exactly.
So that brings us to the last point the text makes, which is about the role of religion in, helping humanity mature and grow spiritually.
Right. The Baha'i Faith sees humanity as having reached this stage of collective maturity, where each person is responsible for their own spiritual development.
So we're trading in our spiritual training wheels for a mountain bike.
I love that.
Right.
Yes.
It's time to take charge of the journey.
Exactly. And Abdul-Baha, he really drives this point home.
Okay.
He says, "In this glorious age, man must be freed from the external forms and practices of religion."
So we're moving beyond just the letter of the law, trying to find the spirit of it.
Exactly.
But that kind of freedom can be scary too.
For sure.
Right. Like without a set path,
Uh-huh.
how do you even know where to start?
Well, that's where the Baha'i Faith offers this framework
Okay.
and a community to support you on that journey. It encourages open-minded dialogue, study of the writings, connection with others who are on a similar path.
So it sounds like a community that values questioning and growth
Exactly.
rather than dogma and rigidity.
More about the journey than having all the answers.
But even with all that, there's still this element of personal experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Something you can't just replicate or explain.
Faith is deeply personal.
Yeah.
What resonates with one person might not resonate with another.
Totally. It's like trying to explain what chocolate tastes like to someone who's never had it.
Yeah.
You can describe it, use metaphors,
You can try.
but they won't really get it
Nope.
until they take a bite.
Exactly.
So the Baha'i Faith is encouraging people to have that firsthand experience, investigate the teachings for themselves, connect with the community.
See if it speaks to their heart.
So it's not about convincing others.
Oh.
It's about inviting them to explore.
That's it.
That's really interesting.
It's about creating that space
Yeah.
where people feel safe to question, to doubt, to discover.
That's cool.
Like planting a seed.
Oh, I like that.
You can nurture it, give it the right environment,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's up to the seed to decide when to blossom.
That's a beautiful analogy.
And I think that's a key takeaway from our deep dive today.
Yeah.
Understanding why more people haven't embraced the Baha'i Faith. It's not about judging or criticizing.
Right.
It's about empathy. recognizing how complex human belief really is.
It's about appreciating everyone's individual journey.
Yes.
The struggles, the triumphs.
All of it.
And the courage it takes to question, to grow, and to find your own truth.
Beautifully said.
You know, going back to our source,
Yeah.
this idea of religion as, like, this constantly evolving thing really stood out to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're always kind of caught between holding on to what we know and reaching for something more.
It's that tension, right?
Yeah.
Between tradition and progress.
Exactly. And the text suggests we're moving into a whole new phase.
Like a new level of spiritual maturity for humanity.
Like for centuries, we were okay with just blind faith.
Right.
But now it's like we're being asked to think for ourselves.
To question, to investigate.
Right. To actively wrestle with these big questions.
Instead of just accepting whatever answers we were given.
Exactly. It's like we've been handed a blank canvas.
Oh, I like that.
And told to create something new.
Instead of just coloring within the lines.
Right. Which is exciting.
Definitely.
But also kind of scary.
It can be, yeah.
Where do we even start?
Well, that's where the Baha'i Faith offers a way forward.
Okay.
It doesn't just highlight the problems with the old ways. It gives us a framework for this new era.
So it's about building on the past, not just rejecting it.
Exactly.
Like taking the wisdom traditions offer, but recognizing we need to evolve our understanding.
Yeah, to keep pace with where humanity is headed.
Right, because the truth isn't some fixed thing.
No, it's always unfolding.
And we're all part of that.
We get to participate in that discovery.
It's like we're all in this giant cosmic play. And the script keeps changing as we go along.
And we're not just passive audience members.
Right, we're actually part of the story.
We get to contribute.
Which brings me to something I've been wondering about this whole time.
Yeah.
We've talked about all these reasons why the Baha'i Faith hasn't been more widely embraced. Tradition, fear, the need for certainty. But if we're supposed to be taking responsibility for our spiritual growth, can we really investigate truth freely?
You mean with all the baggage we bring from our past?
Exactly, all those inherited beliefs.
It's a challenge, for sure.
So how do we do it?
It starts with looking at those assumptions we've inherited, questioning the things we think we know.
And being willing to think for ourselves.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
It's about taking back control of our search for truth.
Yes, and recognizing that the journey itself is the reward.
With all the ups and downs.
The doubts, the discoveries.
That's where the real growth happens.
That's where we find our truth.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive.
I agree.
But we want to leave you with a challenge.
Oh, okay.
Keep exploring these ideas.
Yeah, don't stop questioning.
Challenge those assumptions that feel a little too cozy.
And embrace the adventure of discovering your own truth.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.